Hello, fellow readers and booktubers. This is the reading ticks tag, which was originally written by my friend Kevin Towle. I'll include the prompts below once I complete this. The reading ticks tag. The first question is, do you only read at a specific time of day? No. It's usually circumstances that dictate when I read. Although I should say I'm an early riser. I get up sometimes at the insane o'clock of 5 o'clock a.m. And if I do wake up that early, I'll grab whatever book is at hand or whatever book I happen to be in the middle of it, and I will read. When you get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, that usually gives you about a good 2 hours before you really have to start facing the day. So that's a favored time to read. I like that time of day, just before the sun is coming up. It's quiet outside. In the summer months, it's wonderful. You can open the windows and kind of sit there and read quietly and not be disturbed. Other times of the day, just as the times open up, whenever I get some free time, I grab a book. I do like to read in the evening too. So do you only read at a specific time? Not only, but sometimes accidentally at a specific time. Do you prefer to read in your work everyday clothes, or are you partial to reading in PJs or comfy clothes? Again, circumstances dictate that. When I do my 5 a.m. reading, I'm usually still in my pajamas. Throughout the day, of course, I'll be, if I'm teaching and if I have some time, a couple hours between classes, I'll be reading in my, my jacket and tie kind of thing. When I'm at home, I just change into more comfortable clothes. It's not I don't have a uniform for reading. Again, circumstances kind of dictate what I'm wearing. What is your favorite reading spot? Couch, chair, bed, outdoors, or somewhere else? I do have a chair I think of as my reading chair, but it's not, it doesn't hold me. I'm not exclusive to it. I can pretty much sit anywhere. Although I've noticed as I've gotten older, I don't read in bed so much anymore because I have a tendency to doze off. That's the old man thing. So I prefer to read when I'm sitting. I prefer to read at home too. I like the quiet, the more controlled atmosphere. I've tried reading in coffee shops and it's just too noisy and distracting. I'll read if I'm traveling. I haven't done much traveling lately, but there was a time I was very privileged to be able to do some traveling into Europe, mostly into Italy. And the flight from Chicago to Italy is about 8 hours. And so I just would do a lot of reading on the plane. So reading on an airplane is, I found that very comforting. I like to read in a library if I can find a quiet little nook somewhere. Also, I grew up in a very old house that had a front porch, a screened-in front porch. And I have some great childhood memories of sitting on that screened-in front porch on summer days reading, and especially late in the evening. If I could convince my parents to let me sleep on the front porch outside, I'd be out there at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. The neighborhood's quiet, and I'm sitting there reading away. That was kind of an idyllic memory of mine. Do you snack while reading, or is this a no-go? Definitely a no-go. I've mentioned many, many times before on BookTube that I regard books almost as, gosh, I don't want to overstate this, but they're like sacred things, and I don't want to get my greasy fingerprints all over them. When I was younger, I would occasionally try to eat while I was reading, but being as uncoordinated as I am, that was always kind of problematic. So no, I don't read. I don't eat I don't snack while I'm reading. Do you or have you ever peeked at the end of a book, or do you avoid spoilers at all costs? Well, yeah, I avoid spoilers. The only time I'd ever peek at the end of the book is to see how many pages I have left to go. And that's not always a negative criticism of the book. It's just curiosity. But when I do look at the end of the book, it's just the page number. I'm not looking at the text there, so I can handle the suspense if it's a work of fiction, and if there's some kind of mystery involved. I prefer to let that unfold on its own. I don't like to jump ahead like that. Do you prefer first person or third person narrative, or do you care? I don't care as long as it's handled well. I notice a lot of modern fiction There's a lot of switch back and forth between first person and third person narrative, and the perspective of each chapter can change based on characters and all of that. And most authors that tackle that kind of narrative flow do a really good job at it. And it's not a thing that concerns me, as long as it's done well, and it almost always is, and that it's not distracting or confusing, I guess is a better way of putting it. Do you read dedications, author's notes, acknowledgements, or do you skip those? I usually don't. Dedications are always just kind of interesting to see the names of the people that authors are dedicating their work to. Sometimes it's just to their wives or their children, or to their husband and their children. And I always find that kind of sweet. Sometimes, though, it'll be to a mentor or a particular author or philosopher or celebrity or politician. Sometimes a person from the past. Someone would like to dedicate this to the memory of Dante, and I just find that incredibly intriguing. Author's notes, yes, if the author has gone to that extent that they want to include notes with their text, I'll look at them, I'll glance at them. I read a lot. I think on balance, I read more nonfiction than fiction. So those author notes are usually footnotes, explaining things in the text, or giving the coordinates of where a certain bit of information in the main text can be found. So I'll look at that kind of thing. Acknowledgements, I like to glance at those. Sometimes, especially if it's a work of nonfiction, the author will acknowledge the names of other historians or other philosophers or teachers who have influenced them. And it's always interesting to see who they mention, and if it's anyone that I recognize, or anyone whose work I've also read. I find that kind of interesting. Do you have a favorite reading beverage? 5 o'clock in the morning, it's definitely coffee. If I'm reading in the afternoon, probably some more coffee, unless I become too jittery, and then I'll switch over to tea. Not unusual, I have a bottled water nearby. Sometimes it depends what I'm reading. If it's casual reading, fiction, like Jack London, Ernest Hemingway kind of stuff, I like to have a little glass of scotch at my side. Not enough to get tipsy, because then I would forget what I read. But I do like scotch. Occasionally in the evening, I have to watch that these days. But usually water, coffee, tea. Once in a while, a little scotch. But none of that is absolutely necessary for my enjoyment of reading. How do you decide what to read next? TBR, mood, goals, random choice. I begin every year with a list of books and the order that I want to read them in. But that's always shifting, and it's always changing. If I'm reading histories, I'll try to keep within a particular era or a particular culture. Right now I've been reading a lot of Roman history, and within that I try to read Roman histories in chronological order. If I'm reading fiction, I will try to just read modern fiction, or if I'm reading classical fiction or 19th century English fiction, I'll try to read other books from that era. I'm not hard and firm with that, though. I'm flexible with it. So, and sometimes it's just random choice. Yes. So, but I subject matter and historical context sometimes play a part in what I choose to read next. And then finally, tag some others. You'll see those below. So thank you, Kevin. This was interesting. An interesting tag, and I really enjoyed this very much. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves and keep on reading.